You know, there's a few different things that can cause lifting on a roof deck. One of the things that you'll see, if it's in the middle of the roof, there's nothing around it, no pipes, no valleys, nothing like that, it could be what's called a plywood pop. There's two main type of decks that you can have before the roof goes on. There's some other ones out there, but the two main ones are either plywood or OSB. OSB, people call it particle board, but it's not. It's oriented strand board. You typically don't have a plywood pop with oriented strand board, but with plywood you can. You have to leave a gap in the deck. So if you ever look outside and you walk down the sidewalk and you notice that you have these lines cut into your driveway, you have them cut into the sidewalk, those are called expansion joints. And that's because everything moves. Your house moves, your roof deck moves, concrete moves. It expands and it contracts. When it's hot, it expands. When it's cold, it contracts. So they have to have these gaps to allow them to move around. That way they don't break. Your roof, believe it or not, does the same thing. So underneath the roofing shingles, underneath the tar paper, you have plywood. Now, when the roof was originally put on, there's a couple of different ways they're put on. But over the time, if that plywood either didn't have a gap or the gap wasn't big enough, or just, over time the house settles, the plywood gets closer and closer together and it doesn't leave a gap. You can either use a clip or you can space it. And so let's say you tore off the roof, you put a new roof on and the roofer didn't re-gap the plywood, re-screw it, and it's just sitting right next to each other. It moves around, moves around, moves around, and finally it has nowhere it can go, so the two pieces of plywood are pushing against each other. Finally one gives, and it literally pops that plywood up, and so you get this big buckle on the roof. Now, on a really steep roof, probably not going to have a leak, but when you get into the lower slopes, depending on where that plywood pop is, you could have a leak. Sometimes it's just aesthetics. If that plywood pop on a lower slope roof pops up right where the nails would be, and the water gets stuck into like a little trough on there, the water will work its way under the shingle, start working on the nail because it's not getting off the roof like it's supposed to when you get a leak. And the only way to fix that is take all the shingles off, take the paper off, go down into the plywood, re-gap that piece, either with a saw, then re-secure it, and then put it back together. That's if you're only having one. If you're having it all over the roof, you may need to think about putting a new roof on. When we put a new roof on, we want to do that. So if we're going to take off your roof and we're going to put a new roof on, one of the things we do is called plywood prep. Helps stop that problem. We make sure all the plywood is re-gapped. Then we re-secure the plywood, then put the paper back on, and then put shingles. That keeps you from having a plywood pop and a leak later down the road. Most of the time, they just tear the roof off, they get all the nails or the staples off the roof and just go to town putting the new roof on. That deck needs to be ready to go. If you don't have those gaps, it may not be for years before you have a problem. Most leaks in homes, according to the National Roofing Contractors Association, most problems occur 5th to the 7th year. Most roofing contractors, their warranties run out right about that time.